I'm gonna sit right down and write myself a letter
Good morning.
and make
Happy
believe
Valentine's
it
Day.
came
I don't know
from
if children
you.
still make Valentine's cards that they give to their mom and dad. I remember we used to buy those packets of a lot of little cards, and we write the names of all the other students in the room and give them to each other. And it was important that everyone got a card that says somebody loves them. And I think Charlie Brown is the only kid that doesn't get a card from the little redheaded girl that, he really liked. Love is actually one of the most important things that humans need. To prove this, in Romania during the 1950s and 60s, Nicolae Ceausescu ordered a ban on abortion. And so there were a lot of babies. He wanted to increase the population in Romania. And so the daycare centers were overwhelmed. They had, you may have seen pictures of a room with, over a dozen cribs. And the caretakers could only have time to feed and probably change the babies, but they didn't have time to really hold them. And some of the children died, not from illness or hunger, but because they didn't have any human contact. And that's how important it is for us to know that we're loved. As we grow up from infancy to childhood to teenagers to adulthood, we do everything we can to be noticed, to be accepted, to be loved. And our personalities are based on what we think works for us. Like the first child might behave and do what his parent says. And then this is a generalization, but sometimes the second child is more outgoing and, does things to get attention because, he's a little smaller. And so we look for ways that we can attract attention and be loved. Now, some of us, may look at our cuteness and think of how we dress and whether we look good. Others might have talents like singing and dancing. Some are athletic. Some people are smart and others are just good. But we find ways that, we can really be accepted and receive other people's attention. And we try to hide our bad behavior and let our good behavior stand out. And this is how we're all seeking love. Now, in our society, in our dominant religion, in Western society, it's based on one side of a dualistic divide of good and bad. And it always advocates that good is over bad. Now, our behavior in Buddhism is a little different because it's very difficult to judge on this divide where that line is. And there's always a debate between what is good and what is bad. But it depends on the context. Because eating a donut might be good because it tastes good. And yet it may be bad because it's deep fried and has a lot of sugar and may not be healthy. Now, we may think it's good to earn a lot of money. This is good for the family. And yet it may be bad because we don't spend too much time with the family. And so this problem with being good or bad kind of depends on the context, and it's how we judge these things. And the reason we seek to be loved has a deeper reason. It's our human need to be accepted. As human, I can only exist in a family or tribe. We're not like some other animals who can be solitary, perhaps like a bear, a tiger, or other animals. But like other primates, we need a pack, a group, a community to grow and prosper. So as we grow, we're always trying to figure out the best way to be accepted. We may have a deeper personal aspiration to be a certain way, but we're looking to see how others view us. And our personality shows our good side and we hide our bad side. If you think back in high school, because this is where I think this comes out clearly. Now think back in your high school age. And for me, it was a lot of fun, but it also had a lot of trauma because I can think of how difficult it was to call a girl for a date to go to a dance. Now, I was always worried, is she going to accept? Am I going to look stupid? If I'm going to a party, what clothes do I wear? Do I think I'll be too dressed up or too dressed down? How am I going to fit in? As teenagers, we have this trouble, this problem fitting in. And actually, we carry that on into adulthood. We get a little better about hiding it. Who were our role models in high school? Usually celebrities, movie stars, athletes. You know, personally, I wanted to be a jock because they seemed to be very popular, but I wasn't that great at sports. Of course, being a Japanese American Buddhist at a temple, I played basketball. Now, we had a high school coach that I felt was great. And in those days, we had these smaller teams. You know, you have varsity, but then we had something called the D level, C level, and B level. And as a sophomore, I played D basketball. And then as a junior, I played in the C league. And then as a senior, I played in the B. Now, this wasn't varsity, it wasn't junior varsity, it was the B. Not too many people went to see the B games. Now, this was based on certain things. It was based on your age, your height, and weight. And so myself, at a towering 5'7", I played center. Now, I say this was a great coach because he told me I was a great defensive player. And the reason I was that I was a lousy shooter. I wasn't very good in offense. And so when I played real good defense. And in my mind, that's what I was good at. And it wasn't until years later that I figured out that the coach was saying this because I was a lousy shooter. So again, I was looking at ways to be really accepted. Now, what did you do to be accepted? And what are we doing now to be accepted? We all want to hear and know that we are accepted. And our parents wanted us to be accepted, but they also wanted us to succeed. So they encouraged us, but they often criticized us. And as teenagers, we took this as non-acceptance. But for others, like my parents, my mother was too accepting. She kind of over-mothered, overly motherly and overly protective. And I can remember in the 5th grade, we had this sports day and there was a boxing match. They wouldn't do that these days. But anyway, my opponent in the 5th grade was Fred, a tall kid who wasn't very athletic. And I thought, yeah, I could beat Fred. And I even trained, here I am, a 10-year-old trying to train for a boxing match. So that day, everybody was there, parents and, a lot of other people. And so I had this boxing match with Fred, and I was jumping all over the place. And all Fred did was just kept swinging and hitting me constantly. And at the end of the short match, the referee came up and he said, Fred won, and he held up his hand. And I felt devastated. And so I went back to my corner and I started crying. And then my mother said, oh, no, the referee said that it was a tie. And I didn't hear that. So the next day I asked a friend of mine who was there, I said, did you hear the referee say that it was a tie after he held Fred's hand up as the winner? And he said, no, the ref didn't say that. And so I felt even worse that my mother tried to make me feel good by telling me that the ref had said it was a tie when Fred obviously had won. And so she was trying to save my self-esteem, but I actually felt worse. And so this was a false system. And so we should be truthful and compassionate. So instead of a Western religion that judges us by our piety, whether we're good and bad, in Buddhism, in Shin Buddhism, we have the notion of being accepted just as we are, as a basic truth. And that may make us think that we can do anything, just, if we're accepted. And actually at the time of Shinran, there was a group of men who thought that. And they thought that they could, chase women, drink, carouse, because at the end, Amida would accept them just as they are. And Shinran realized that this was a problem. And so he had to go and talk to these men and tell them that just because there was an antidote, don't take the poison, because there's also karma. And so this is what we need to do, to be truthful and compassionate. Now, raising children with honesty is the best way, and to use wisdom and compassion. And we could describe to a child that their behavior does have consequences. And just with compassion, we could raise them honestly. and teach them that they are responsible for their actions. So how does all this relate to the practice we have of voicing the Nembutsu, Namo Amida Butsu? You know, last week I talked about subpersonalities, different parts of us. And so we have this thought that we are accepted just as we are, because we have this child that feels hurt, but we also have an adult, and that it is the adult inside of us that could help that injured child heal. And we, as an adult, can use wisdom and compassion to help our other parts of ourselves heal, especially when we hear the Nembutsu, Namo Amida Butsu, taking refuge in wisdom and compassion, and having the thought of the Buddha or the honorable parent accepting us just as we are. This is a reminder that I could be a great defensive player and not think so much of being a great offensive player. And we don't have to be told that we tied if we feel confident in ourselves. You know, when we lose, we're all right because we're accepted just as we are. So this is how we heal our inner child. Now, like Charlie Brown, who hasn't gotten a Valentine card from that little redheaded girl, we're waiting for a Valentine from someone who loves us. But we can wait and wait, but let me suggest the solution from an old song. And it's an old song because you can understand the lyrics, and it doesn't have a big, loud bass guitar or loud drums. It doesn't have a lot of swear words. This song is from Fats Waller, and I'll say the words and not sing it so you don't turn off the audio. And this song will help us understand some things. And it goes like this. I'm going to sit right down and write myself a letter and make believe it came from you. I'm going to write words oh so sweet. They're going to knock me off my feet. Kisses on the bottom. I'll be glad I got them. I'm going to smile and say, I hope you're feeling better. And sign with love the way you do. I'm going to sit right down and write myself a letter and make believe it came from you. So I don't know the situation that Fats Waller wrote about this song, about sending this letter to himself to make himself feel better. But this is the solution of receiving the Valentine card. This is how we might help our wounded child, that we have a child within us that has these insults or injuries from childhood where we feel unaccepted. And when we do that, we can act out and we get angry, hurt. We feel helpless. No one's there to help us. And we want a parent to say, you're okay, just as you are. And that's when we could receive this letter. And the letter is Namo Amida Butsu. I'm okay just as I am. This is the Buddha, our honorable parent, saying, you're okay just as you are. We want to hear the words Namo Amida Butsu. And in order to do that, we say the words. Our practice is to say the Nembutsu, Namo Amida Butsu. And when we do, we hear the words. And that is our letter to ourselves, our Valentine card. Somebody loves us. But it's not just actually myself. We're reminded that we're surrounded by wisdom and compassion, and it's always with us. And we can say these words anytime to remind us that this is always true. And by constantly saying the Nembutsu, we constantly remind ourselves that we're loved. We have the most important need of humans. And so just by practicing, by saying the Nembutsu, we send a letter, a Valentine to ourselves by saying and hearing the Nembutsu. So please join me in repeating these words so we can say it and hear it and realize that we are accepted just as we are. Gasho, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu.
And write myself a letter and make believe it came